What if I told you that you could smell a memory that you've never lived? That one single spritz could transport you to a library at midnight, or a fairy garden at daybreak, or even a stranger's leather jacket at a cigar lounge? Those experiences are what I want to talk about today. Because wearing fragrances isn't just about smelling nice, it's about experiencing stories and exploring personalities. Hello, Internet. My name is Gabbana and welcome to my channel. Welcome if you're new, welcome if you're old. I'm grateful and glad to have you here. I hope you enjoy the video. Please, if you are enjoying my content, please do like and subscribe and leave comments for me. I would like to engage in discussions about perfumes and all of that. Cool. So as I mentioned, today we're dipping our feet into the storytelling world of perfumery, or storytelling in perfumery. Storytelling is the art of transforming a scent into an emotion. So because you can't see scent, brands and perfumers use their formulations and their marketing to help you feel it. Okay, so firstly we'll have the perfumer's narrative. So this is their brief, this is the concept, the idea, the story that they are wanting to tell through their perfume. So at a technical level, perfumers can use the fragrance pyramid, which is something that I've spoken about, that layering of top, middle, and base notes. So they can sort of borrow this or use this to tell their story. So the top notes will be everything that you smell at first, the first few minutes of the story. Their job is to grab you, to set a tone, and basically tell you, just give you some excitement of the things that are going to come later. So these are the citruses, the light herbs, light florals. They're volatile and basically they're the hook. Then there's a hard note. So these are the character development, if you may call it that. The emotional core of the story. So this is what the perfumer wants you to know, what the perfumer wants you to get from the perfume. So your deeper florals, your roses, your jasmines, your spices, those are what the hard note of a fragrance could be. And then you have your base notes, the resolution, the conclusion. So this is what remains of the perfume hours later, when everything has faded. That's what you have. So your sandalwoods, your vetifers, your musks, your ouds, those deep notes of the perfume. So this is the perfume's final sentence. And if it's a good one, it will last with you for hours and hours. So essentially through this, the perfumer is telling a 3-act narrative that's basically sprayed onto your skin. So the stories that can be told can take different forms. There's memory stories. So some fragrances are about memories. So places, they take you back to a place, to a time, to an experience, that either you've had or that the perfumer wants you to experience. So Maison Margiela is an example of this with their Replica series. So each fragrance in their series is named after a scene, if we may call it that. So you have specific emotional locations that they want to transport you to with every fragrance. For example, there's Jazz Club, which is a boozy, smoky, leathery, sexy kind of perfume. And the perfumer, the intention is to sort of take you to, a sophisticated jazz club. They have, like a lazy Sunday morning, I think that's what it's called, which transports you to, just being in your clean bedding on a Sunday morning, and you just want to sleep in. I have church on Sundays, so that's not an experience that I could have. But just imagine, just laying in your bed, everything is clean, it smells beautiful, it smells powdery, it smells fresh. So they want to transport you to that feeling, that moment. One perfume that specifically did this for me was Dolce and Gabbana's Light Blue. So the first time I smelled it, the Sicilian lemon, the florals that came in, I can't say it transported me to Italy, but it definitely gave me that deep desire to want to be there, to want to walk down the streets of Italy, because it just brought that on. And then there's fantasy stories. So these are like abstract, these are worlds, perfumes that are creating worlds that don't necessarily exist. So worlds of romance, worlds of mystery, worlds of escape, essentially. I think Tiziana Terenzi does this well, from my experience with, reading through their pamphlets and the 2 perfumes that I have, but specifically Kirke, which is inspired by a Greek mythological character, Circe, who is an enchantress, basically uses their powers to try to change men into different things. So they use a potion to do that. So essentially, in their interpretation, Kirke is supposed to be that magical potion in the bottle. It's sweet, it's hypnotic, and it's impossible to ignore. And I can attest to that. And then we have identity stories. So these are stories about character, about identity, perfumes that help you embody something that's specific, a personality or character of sorts. So basically they're about who you are or who you want to become or who you can become. Sort of like wearing Tom Ford's Black Orchid, which is a bold, mysterious, and sensual persona. Well, it's meant to inspire that. So the fragrance doesn't really describe you, but it constructs you or that personality, if that makes sense. And then we have the second part. So the perfumer has done their part, right? They have created the story and interpreted it and turned it into this beautiful potion, and now it's over to the actual brand, and they get to play their part in this beautiful storytelling. That's a layer up. Different houses will do this part differently, right? Because not every perfume house is driven by this mythological storytelling type of concept, so they interpret it differently. At one level, we have a perfume brand or a perfume house that is solely created or exists around this form of storytelling, right? So every concept needs to fit within the kind of story, the kind of perfumes, the kind of stories they want to tell, and that informs the kind of perfumes they are essentially creating. So one example of this is imaginary authors. So on their website, rather, they say that they view fragrances like books, and it doesn't make sense to just own one fragrance. So essentially, when you collect their perfumes, it's like building up a library of stories, but in the form of scent. So that's the concept, that's the sort of principle that the house is built on, and it drives which kind of perfumes they put out. So every single perfume that they have is a story. They have, a whole character world in it that fits into the kind of brand that they are. And then you have a house like zoologists, which is a very interesting one for me. I would love to smell their perfumes one day, but basically they do the same thing, but they want to tell animal stories. So their perfumes are based on an animal, and that animal is like sort of the core character, and they sort of try to imagine the character that the animal represents, the habitat that the animal would be found in, and they try to tell a story around that, and that would be what the perfume is about. So for example, they have perfumes centered around bats, around chameleons, around hummingbirds. So with the bat, looking at the layout or the presentation on the site, it's more about the darkness, the wetness, dark cave that the bat would find itself in, and all that would be surrounded by, and they try to capture that mystery, that darkness, that intensity into their perfume. I think it's a very cool concept. It's very creative, and yeah, I would like to. I think why I want to smell their stuff is I want to know and see how they interpret the actual set of the animals themselves, and translate that into something that is beautiful to wear. Instead of smelling like a literal rhino, what does smelling like a rhino mean for them, type of thing. So I think it's very interesting. But yeah, they're in the US, I believe, so it would be very difficult for me to get their stuff, but I think it's a very cool concept. So that's the one level of it. It's a very closed universe. The perfume house exists to do this type of thing. And then on another level, so some perfume houses might look at, okay, in the market, who do they want to target, who do they want to sell a specific perfume to, and then they built a brief around that, and they built a story around that to basically try to call and allure those people into that story that they're creating. So essentially the perfume that comes about is inspired by the end goal that they have, if that makes sense. So for example, I'm not saying that this is exactly what happens, but I imagine briefs are very, I guess, closed off things. But looking at the YSL Black Opium example, so the brief I imagine would be like a young woman who's rock chic and edgy, but accessible. They have like this high nightlife energy type of thing going on. So I imagine that's the kind of messaging, that's the kind of person they want to either attract or inspire from the people wearing their perfume. So their campaigns were centered around that story, and they have Zoe Kravitz as their brand or their perfume face, and I guess she embodies that. Like if you think about Zoe Kravitz, she has that, you know, that chic, that edgy kind of look to her. So she's a perfect picture of, you know, that kind of persona, if I may call it that. And basically, the whole thing was saying that the night is yours. So go out there and capture, you know, and just conquer the night in a sense. So yeah, as I mentioned, the fragrance does not generate the story, but is inspired by the story that they've already put forward. And I guess those are the types of ways that perfumers and perfume brands can collaborate to create stories for their perfumes and their offerings. And then the last part. So the last part is very personal. So the perfumers come, they do their own thing. The perfume house and the brands, they come and they do their own thing. And then it lands to us, to you, to me, the consumer. And we're the last part. And they can't control what kind of story we tell, what kind of story we live out when we are using and enjoying their fragrance. Essentially, when that fragrance touches your skin, it interacts with you, it interacts with your chemistry, with, you know, your hormones, your biology, and it tells a story of its own. So what I learned through this is that your nose is the only sense with a direct line to the part of your brain that processes emotions and memory. I left out the scientific portions of it because I didn't want to confuse myself, but I thought that is so significant. And it explains why when you inhale something, it can directly conjure up vivid emotions, vivid vivid memories of whatever that scent that you've inhaled represents. When you inhale something, the scent receptors send signals straight to your olfactory bulb, which sits right next to the emotional and memory centers. And this is exactly why when you smell something that's familiar, that can trigger a vivid memory, that can trigger a vivid and intense emotion because of how, I guess, your biology is set up. So in a way, this means that fragrance doesn't just remind you of things, but it can sort of transport you back to certain memories, which is very impactful and powerful. And this is the exact same way that you add your own story to a perfume. You wear that perfume to an interview, to your first day at a job, to a date, and it creates something. It creates a memory, right? And the next time you sniff that perfume, the experience of that day comes back. The emotions of that day come back, and you have a story that is attached to that scent. And it's not just linking us back to the past. It's not just taking me back to my childhood or my mother or aunt's perfumes, but you know, as we wear them, we are also creating these memories. We are creating these stories. I was just thinking about when I was putting together the script. I wore Versace's Yellow Diamond to a race with a friend of mine invited me to a race, so I wore that because, you know, it's fresh, it's not strong, it's kind of, it felt like the right type of fragrance to wear on that day. Fortunately, it wasn't like an overly hot day. It was like towards the end of winter, coming into spring. So yeah, we did the race, and after the race, we were going to do brunch with my friend. And normally, I'm very self-conscious about these things. I know myself, I know my sense. So I was a bit uncomfortable because, you know, just did a 5-kilometer walk, and now you're gonna go have food around people. But as I was going about the day, I could smell, you know, that the citrusiness that was lingering combined with the woodiness and the florals. It was just beautiful. And I think in my brain, I told myself that, okay, this perfume has my back. So now every time I'm going out and, you know, I'm not sure, I don't want to really wear perfume, I don't want anything strong, that's one of the fragrances I will grab because I know that, okay, she sticks around, like she has my back, you know. So I've created that connection with that specific perfume. Cool. So in the end, the perfumer and the brand, they do their own thing, and it's beautiful, but that only serves to guide us into an experience. It doesn't control the kind of experience we have. So whatever the makers of Yellow Diamond were trying to inspire or thought of when they put together that perfume, that gets overridden by my experience with it. And it doesn't have to be as intense as all the things I've mentioned. Sometimes it's just, you know, just putting on a perfume and going to work and, you know, smelling it and it smells nice. Your day is boring. It's just the same old Wednesday, but the perfume on that day was a difference. And, you know, smelling those florals every now and then just gets you excited. Whatever the case might be, like it's just taking pleasure in what you're wearing. Doesn't have to be that deep, but that in itself is something. So, no, I don't believe perfume is just about smelling nice. I think there's so much more to it. So, perfume is one of the most intimate ways of storytelling. It travels with you. That scent is whispering to you throughout the day or screaming loudly, depending on the kind of scent she is. But essentially, it becomes a part of how people interact with you, how people remember you, even. So I would say the next time you wear a perfume, just think about